the Chef and Sommelier Sessions, featuring Chef Ryan Smith. Words just can't describe how much I adore New York City. From all the amazing neighborhoods and their intrinsic culture and cuisine, the artistic expression, the amenities, and just everyday hustle and bustle of life. I live in Harlem, which is a dream come true, but I was so excited to venture off of Manhattan for once to Brooklyn to see my chef buddy, Mr. Chef Ryan Smith, who recently wrapped up a 16-month stay in London. So before hopping on the 2 train to Brooklyn, I stopped off at Pumpet's to see the owner and sommelier, Moselle, for the wine. Chef Ryan, who is also a sommelier, suggested something light and crisp, so I knew exactly what to bring to pair with the savory South Indian dish he picked up while he was in London. Now that my job is done, ladies and gentlemen, here's a special guest chef for this episode.
Hey, I'm Ryan Smith. Technically a chef and restaurant consultant. I'm actually going by international food and wine adventurer these days. Been doing a lot of travel and kind of food and wine adventuring, and I've spent the last kind of 16 months living in London and using that as a home base to travel throughout Europe, learning everything I can along the way about food and wine. In London, I was teaching a lot of cooking classes. A very popular class was South Indian cooking class, and a fun and kind of easy dish is a South Indian savory donut. So we're going to be making that today. It's good because it's only a few ingredients, so you can kind of put your own spin on it. It's gluten-free, it's healthy. Just kidding, it's not healthy, it's a donut. But it is kind of fun and easy to make. So there's only a few ingredients. This is yeast, which I've just mixed with a little bit of warm water, and that's blooming. One thing in London, it was very easy to find Indian ingredients because there's a lot of good Indian grocery stores. Here, it's a little harder. Traditionally, this dish is made with uri dal, which is kind of a black lentil where they've peeled the skin. It can be hard to find if you don't go to an Indian grocery store. But the good thing is that we're in Brooklyn, and what Brooklyn does very well is make a little hipster-fied version of all this stuff. So traditionally, where they would just use spinach, we're going to add a little kale, because you can't cook anything in Brooklyn without some kale. Instead of the uri dal, what is a bit easier to find and I think is a good substitution is yellow lentils. So we have these yellow lentils that have been soaked in warm water for 2 hours. This is going to form the base of the batter. Pretty traditional ingredient is green peas. Usually you'd use Indian chili pepper. These are serrano chilies. I think they have a bit more flavor. A problem I have with this dish sometimes is that it's kind of just crispy and greasy and salty and good, but it doesn't have a ton of flavor. So I'm going to add a few other little things to make beef the flavor up a little bit. I'm using green onion tops and bottoms. Also pretty classic, just regular onion. Turmeric is a classic ingredient for this dish. I'm actually going to add a little bit of mustard powder. Mustard's pretty common in Indian cuisine. You don't usually use mustard in this dish, but we're gonna do it. So I think to get started, we're going to make our dough, and you want to make sure that the lentils are drained, because a problem that you can have sometimes is if there's too much water in the lentils, your dough is going to be really watery. You can always go ahead and add more water at the end if you need to. I also like to hold some lentils back in case it does get too watery. So we'll start with that. So now when I'm going to add mustard powder, turmeric, pepper, a generous amount of salt. We're gonna add some more salt at the end too. Gonna add our bloomed yeast. Blender is good because it has a dough setting, so it's going to start kind of slow. You're going to move it up. whole chilies. A little bit more liquid. Add a bit more water. Just a little bit of potato starch. Some recipes call for rice flour. I feel like potato starch makes it a little bit more crispy. I also think that if you're not using the real Yuri dal, it'll help kind of give that perceived glutinous effect. Boom, that's what you're looking for. So it's good to do this a bit ahead of time, because that'll give the yeast a little bit of a chance to rise as well. Two parts to the green onions. There's the green part, and then there's the white part. Usually this bit is better for cooking, and this bit is better to serve fresh for this dish. We're gonna do everything inside. The kale is gonna add a lot of crunching texture. Where the white bottom bits are going to be a bit more kind of something to bite into. So I'm going to cut this one nice and small, so that way the onions can kind of fully cook. Then we're going to do some kale. That's superfood. And these, especially the kale, but the spinach as well, is going to make the donut seem a bit more fluffy. Again, I'm kind of cutting the spinach a little bit larger than the kale. A little bit more water. That is the perfect. So I'll incorporate it. I'm going to dust it one more time with a little bit more potato flour. If you don't have yeast, you can also do baking powder. There we go. And as you can see, it's pretty sticky, and this is what you actually want, and this is the perfect consistency. It's not too wet, it's not too dry. You can kind of manipulate it. If you try to just go in there with your hands, it's gonna get all over your hands. A good trick is if you put a little olive oil on your hands, it won't stick. And you can really do whatever shape you want, but I do think that that classic donut shape, because the center is hollow, it allows it to cook evenly. If you just do a big ball, you might end up with some raw in the middle. And I'm using plastic wrap, but parchment paper works really well. And you just want this as a place where you can put these before you throw them in the oil. Alright, so that's what you're going for right there.
For the wine, I selected a 2016 Touraine Sauvignon Blanc, aka Baby Sancerre.
That is not the least bit healthy, but it tastes really good.
The donuts were amazing, the wine pairing was perfect, so now it's just time for us to have fun and catch up. So you and I will have to catch up next time. In the meantime, drink life up as much as possible.